All right. And we are live on Odds Property Investors. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. And sorry, because I know we're a few minutes late. We're having such fun on the pre-chat. So how are you going, Bernie? What's happening?
Really well, thank you. Doing well. It's been a good day with my girls. A little bit of work, a little bit of school pickup. So that's been my life today.
Wow, yeah, it's been a bit wet down our way, hasn't it? Like it's been fun potentially navigating that, but no, it's good, isn't it?
Well, that's what great. Sydney does. Sydney just is absolute summer loving, and then it's just 2 weeks of rain to remind you that we're coming into some wet season. So I think we've got this for a little while now.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going, Joe? What's happening, man? How you going?
I'm fabulous, mate. I am fabulous. Kicking goals, having fun, getting properties bought, getting properties happening. Very busy, very, very busy, which is a good thing. It's interesting to see which markets are kind of shifting and changing, and what markets are kind of getting overblown now. So it's cool to see that transition happen in real time. But how are you, Jeff?
No, I'm great. I'm excited for this session. There has been a lot of interest, and it's good to see, because I think there's so much opportunity for this, and we're in the pre-chat on Friday. We're talking about no one cares as much about your money as you. So I think that's a part of why self-managed super fund it can be a tremendous opportunity for people, and taking control of your financial kind of future. So on this session, though, we're going to talk about, well, a macro kind of what's working in sort of lending at the moment, which is going to be great. And we're going to talk to the main course, which is SMSF, Self-Managed Super Fund. And we'll touch on structures, other structures in trusts as well. So it's going to be a fantastic session. So before we get into it, I'll introduce Bernie. She is the director of Attilia Wealth. And you've been running the business now for 8 years. You were telling me my research suggested 7 years, but no, you've absolutely done heaps in your time, in terms of you started off doing accounting, and you were telling us that you found that accounting, whilst it is incredibly valuable, I think you have too much talent for accounting, so you jumped into financial services and HR, did your degrees, and graduated with distinction, which is very hard to do. So well done with that.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm blushing over here. Wow.
That's all right. No, good on you. And the other thing we love about you as well, and the team, I've caught up with Aaron a couple of weeks ago for coffee. You're all about you're not just about the work and the sort of financial. You do stuff. So you enjoy things such as Pilates. What's Pilates? Boxing, weights, and yoga. And you also have a family life. You mentioned that today. So you've got the beach sort of right by, and the pool as well. So that's a brief intro for those that don't know.
What doesn't she do? That's the question.
Where do you find the time? I need some tips.
Mate, I'm excited for this one because Bernadette, you are, because when you're in the vehicle of wealth, right? You need to have a couple of players on your team, and those players need to be talking to each other and communicating with each other a little bit, and knowing what's going on with you as the client. Like, you have to have a mortgage broker, you have to have an accountant, don't have to, but you can have a buyer's agent, all of these, and conveyancing. All of these people need to be in the vehicle at the same time talking to each other. But everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, and the things that a mortgage broker wants and what an accountant wants is a little bit different at times. And what the accountant wants is a little bit different to what the buyer's agent might want from an asset selection. So what I'm keen to understand is having both the accountancy background and the mortgage and broking background. That's awesome, because you're kind of merging the two worlds to really absolutely know what is the best for this client from a broking standpoint and from an accounting standpoint. The SMSF stuff is super interesting as well, and super complex. We've kind of touched on the subject a little bit, but I want this to be like kind of SMSF masterclass, if you will. But I think we're first going to touch on the lending side of things. But Jeff, I think you have a first question you have to ask. Oh, disclaimers.
Before I ask the question, we'll do that now, and then we don't have to do it about 15 times.
Very true. This is not financial advice. We are not financial advisors. You should consider seeking independent legal, financial, taxation, and any other advice. Check the information relates to your unique circumstances. This is just three friends having a chat, and you get to be on the wall. listening in.
Yeah, and throw your questions and comments in as well, people. If it's on Facebook, I will have to manually enter it. So if you jump on YouTube, that it would be great, because then I can just bring it straight up. That would be make my life nice and easy, and your question will get a lot more traction on YouTube. So Bernie, though, what we'd love to ask people first up is, what got you into sort of the property or financial services industry? Why did you get involved?
Such a good question. I was on my honeymoon with my husband, Aaron, and we were talking about what does our life look like? You know, we're going to get married, or we were married, honeymoon, kids, and we like both in corporate, and we're like, we can't do this. We can't have our family live the healthy lifestyle we want to live, and we want to craft a life for ourselves. And Aaron at the time was working in marketing at CBA, and was supporting the third-party channel, which is mortgage brokers. And I said, brokers, this industry so well, jump in. So got back from our honeymoon, life settled into normal. And then a few months later, I said, hey, we had that chat. What's happening? A week later, he'd quit his job. He'd started his Cert 4. And I was like, I was hoping for a little bit more preparation than that, maybe some savings in the bank, not just jumping straight in. But so that was his start into the business. And if anyone's met Aaron, you know that he has a true love for property and buying property, and it being the vehicle for you being able to create wealth. And about a year into it, he was growing and expanding. And I thought, hey, I've got an amazing skill set with my accounting background, numbers and people. I can jump in and help. And it's been 8 years now of Atelier Wealth in its current format, and we haven't looked back. Sky's the limit.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's funny how you jump. You got one. This is it, isn't it? You get one alert from the wife. You get told what to do, and then you're like, "Oh, I totally forgot about that. I better go do that." And then he pulls the trigger straight away.
Pulls the trigger straight away. Tells you a lot about Aaron, but guys, maybe some savings in the bank. So don't recommend that. That's why you jump into your future career or business. But for us, it worked because there's that saying, guys. It's like if you want to take the island, you burn all the ships, burn all the boats, because you don't have a second choice. You can't look back, and that was it for us. So burn the boats, burn the escape route, and you just got to charge forward.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I love that story about Cortez and the Spaniards in the Spain. I mean, it's a little bit of a sad story what happened over there in Conquer, but they didn't necessarily burn that. They sort of, the boats were there. So, but it's a great story. They did burn the boats kind of metaphorically, but didn't literally
metaphorically burn the boats, did they? Metaphorically, not physically burnt them. But I think actually anyone that is thinking about making a jump into business, in the property, just from a property, as we're a property channel, right? Just consider the lending requirements for a business. So you generally can't borrow to buy property for about 12 months. So you need to have at least 12 months financials, and then sometimes it's 2 years worth of financials. Actually, Bernadette, why am I saying this? You're the broker. What do you typically see from a broking perspective of brand new businesses that have just started up to when they can eventually start to borrow? So if that person out there does have that new startup idea, how do they think about it in that property journey?
Totally. So the banks need to see the ABN have been registered for at least 18 months. So that's ABN registration. And there's a new policy, or I'd say relatively new policy that's come out. And it's referred to as either simple verification for self-employed or director's wages. So the banks don't actually need to see any more tax returns and financials of the business. But if you can prove to them that you've been paying yourself a regular and consistent wage from your business to yourself, then they'll actually take that 6 months evidence, annualize it over 12 months, and then they'll give you borrowing based on that. So as long as your ABN's at least 18 months and you've paid yourself 6 months and it's legit, like proper payments, lodging with the ATO, then you're good to go. So it's not as hard as it used to be. It did used to be 2 years of tax returns, then 1 year, and now this 6 months policy is a really exciting one.
Wow, that's super interesting. Yeah.
Is that with a self-employed specialist lender, I imagine? Or is that with a major lender? We can get that.
That's with a major lender. We're not talking low doc. This is full
Wow.
doc lending with big four banks. This is legit.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I started my business and I waited 2 years before I could lend. My problem was I could have bought a property, and I was about to buy a property, and I'm like, you know what? I am starting a new business. I need to be careful. So I had this massive savings pool to go into a property, and then I started the business, and it was cash flow positive from day one. So I'm now stuck on this money, and I have to wait years for it until I can get the lending. But 6 months is ridiculous. So there you go. If you take any golden nugget away, think about if you are transitioning, maybe open that ABN up now. Get started. It's free.
Correct. If you're thinking about a business, open the ABN now, and then at that point when you are running the business, 6 months is what we need. Consistent pay
and you
slips.
can change the name as well. You can create a company and change the name and associate that ABN with that one. Not financial advice, of course, as we've already covered off. So what are we going to talk about first, Jeff? We're going to talk about exploring what?
Well, I want to know, because I think it's important for people because lending changes on a weekly basis. Oftentimes during the Royal Commission, when I was in the game, it was you would get 20 emails by 10 a.m. on Monday morning saying, okay, we changed our policy on serviceability, we changed our policy on casual employment. So what I want to hear, the question I want to ask, so people can get that knowledge, and from somebody who's doing sort of probably hundreds and maybe thousands of loans a year, maybe not thousands, you'd have a huge team to do that. But what's currently happening in the lending space? What is sort of what's working, what's not working?
Great question. So I mean, we're in a position where we all know rates have increased substantially over the last 12 to 18 months, and people's borrowing is stretched. So when we're in that position, I think it's really important for you, looking at your portfolio, understanding where you sort of sit in the tier of lenders, because there is a tier of lenders. So typically, good brokers will be taking you to the big four banks. So think your CBA, ANZ, NAB, Westpac, right? They're taking you there first. They're maxing out your borrowing power, releasing any equity, getting your approvals to go again. Then if you look at your second tier of lenders, still mainstream lenders, but you're looking more like possibly Macquarie, AMP. They have some more generous policies when it comes to bonuses. Sometimes they look at 1 year worth of bonus income. So that's really important to know if you've maybe started a new role and you only have one bonus, instead of most lenders need to see evidence of 2. So that's a really good little strategy there. And then if we've looked at that second tier of lenders and you're maxing out again, you are then looking at your third tier lenders. So that would be like people would know, if your First Max, your La Trobes, Peppers, Liberties, all that sort of stuff. And understanding where you sort of sit in your portfolio and what lender you are with will give you a bit of an indication as to, okay, where am I at in my borrowing? So I spoke to someone this week and they're like, I'm fully maxed out. And I went, okay, great, let's talk through your portfolio. They had 4 properties. They were all with St. George. And I look at that as a seasoned broker going, dude, you've got power. If you're all with St. George, you're still in that first, second tier of lenders. If we really want to keep going, we can go down and keep going again. Of course, moving to the third tier of lenders, you do have higher rates and higher fees, of course, but something to be mindful of where you sit in that scale.
Interesting. Yeah, because it also might be worthwhile mentioning why people should use a broker. I know this is a pretty basic question, but I was having this conversation with someone today where I was getting a loan and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go straight to the lender because I don't have time. It's a quick deal. I need to get it done. I called up the lender. They can't lend me any money. And I'm like, oh gosh, okay. I'm going to have to call up this other lender. I call up another lender. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? This is just stupid. I don't know what the policies are. Like this person want this, I think it was St. George wanted a 40% LVR for the lend. I'm like, oh, okay, that doesn't work. But why people use brokers, and why should they consider using them?
I mean, you've answered the question. It's the choice that you get. And then I think I would add to that is, for experienced and seasoned brokers, it's the experience. So it's the people that have had the hundreds of conversations with property investors, that have gone through the journey. You've like one of my most successful investors, he's now at 15 properties. We've taken him all the way through that journey. This is like this is years of relationships that we've built, experiences we've had with clients, seeing genuine, like, people's property portfolios grow, seeing equity, releasing it, going again. You know, taking it to that next level, that more advanced step, is when you're starting to consider trusts, purchasing in companies, those sorts of entities. And what we'll speak about later tonight as well is SMSFs as well. And when you're speaking with those really good, experienced mortgage brokers, in particular when they're experienced in an investing lens, you're just getting a level of experience and knowledge and understanding and expertise that you can't match if you're not doing this 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, every day.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. The biggest thing for me is, like, property is a finance game, right? It is. Like, it's how to work out how to get the best ROI. You have X amount of dollars of capital that you need to invest. How do I invest this capital to get the absolute best return on investment, the best bang for my buck? And then be able to not just buy this one, but what has this one got to be so it doesn't screw me up for the next one? So just because you can borrow $1.2 million with a major lender doesn't mean that you should buy a $1.2 million asset, because you might be able to spread that out over 2 or 3 purchases and actually be able to borrow to buy better properties that are in better growth locations that are going to get you a better cash flow return. But you would never have thought about that if you didn't have that broker conversation to start with, because they're an investment savvy broker. So it's one of those things I just think it's crazy. And also, the broker gets paid by the bank anyway. You don't have to pay any cash. You don't have to. You're not paying for the service.
Just to set people's minds at ease, though, as well, I think just because the broker gets paid by the bank, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not working for you. They 100% are working for, because there's that perception. There used to be when, and there was the AFR. You probably saw a few of those articles come out about the average Sydney broker earning sort of 490 odd thousand, and it was just completely. Well, I believe it's completely untrue. And there was those other sort of things about conflicted REM and all that sort of stuff. And it was just interesting that in the AFR. But anyway, that just to put people's minds at ease.
I'll put a little, like, disclaimer on that. So yeah, like, I mean, there might be a broker that's earning 490K, right? But what's not taken into account is the team that he or she has underneath him to make that happen. Because let me tell you, broking is not a one-man sport anymore. It used to be. It used to be a game where you could be a one-man band, you could go out, you could write loans, you know, get it all done. It has become, in the last 8 years, it has become more complex, more compliance, and we need big teams to support us to do that. So be mindful of that. While you might see your broker, the good brokers will have a big team supporting them to make the magic happen as well.
Yeah,
super
I
interesting.
wanted to ask this one, because we seem to have a good amount of self-employed sort of people view us tonight. So why can you get a loan easier being PAYG than sole trader? That's an interesting one to unpack. I mean,
yeah, that's a great question. For whatever reason, banks have decided that PAYG employees are less riskier than someone that is a sole trader. You could turn it on its head and you could actually say, well, I disagree, because if you're employed, you could at any moment get the flick. And with a sole trader, you might have multiple customers that you support. So that's actually less riskier, because if one customer decides to give you the flick, you've got, you know, however many other customers there. But that's what the banks have historically viewed PAYG versus sole traders, and therefore been a little bit harder to get loans. But like I mentioned earlier, that 6 month, if you've been paying yourself 6 months with pay slips, that's a really good tactic for self-employed people to get lending now.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay.
Before we get into the main course, and we will get to our sponsor as well, but I want to know what are the, so we've talked to, you've got the free tiers, which is usually you sort of go from the hardest to the easiest in terms of the lending criteria and serviceability. What are the sort of things that you find that the more experienced brokers help, such as yourself and Aaron, what are you doing for your clients that the newer broker may not be doing?
It's definitely understanding that selection of lenders, for sure, that tier of lenders. I've noticed this year in particular, as you know, we are taking people down to that last tier and we're going, all right, what's next? It's having more advanced discussions about trust. It's having discussions about buying companies, about SMSFs. And I feel like people are a lot more open to having those conversations because, one, we're itchy. We still want to keep buying property. We've been waiting for rates to just stabilize, and finally at the beginning of the year they did, and we're like, all right, this is our moment, right? Migration's high, supply's low. We've got to get in. Construction costs are still super high, and people are like, how do we make this happen?
Yeah, it's it's how it's like asking that question is what separates a good investor between a great investor. The bank, like you're that person that you said had 4 loans with the exact same lender, the first tier lender, like they weren't really asking the question, and then you were able to plant that seed of like, actually you need to ask a better question of how do I do this, how do I go to that next lender? And this is one thing actually that I think is worthwhile mentioning is when you have a team of experts, it's okay to grow out of them. You can have, like, my first lender my first broker that I went to was one of the ones you just walk in off the street, and they got me a loan, and it was a terrible experience. They didn't really know anything about property investing. And then you move up, and then you move up, and then you move up. So it's okay if you jump around to different lenders brokers, accountants, buyers agents, anyone on your team, because you've outgrown them. And that's okay. So yeah, have a mortgage broker that's helping you. And if they can't solve your problem, be comfortable enough to move on to the next person, but give them a chance, obviously, can they help you?
Yeah, definitely. And ask the question, because I think often, because we talk to so many clients, like you guys would know. And if you just book in a time and go, hey, I know you said that we're a bit stuck. I just want to know, is there anything else that I haven't considered? And if it's still a no, and at that point, well, make a booking, go somewhere else. But just give them that chance to go, I'm really hungry to go again. How do we do it?
Yeah. How do we make this happen? There's a great question that's come up here from Brendan. Does Bernadette see people structured in trust for lending struggle to get rates down once they start to fall?
Okay.
So I think he's saying like rates as they're, you're locked in at this rate for however long, but it's a trust, so it's at 7.2%. And then as interest rates drop, is that what you're saying, Brendan?
Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying. So there is that perception, and maybe it's a reality because and I've heard it being justified that there is more admin costs for the bank because they have to employ more people to sort of to crunch the numbers and count the beans and send the beans out into the universe. But that's the justification for higher rates in trust. But is that the reality, Bernadette?
Yeah, so trust lending, company lending does attract higher rates, that's for sure. But you also have the option to pick variable, right? So if you have, I've just had a client, they've locked something in low 7s for a commercial purchase they've done. So it's commercial purchase in a trust company at low 7s. So, you are talking on the other end. That's still a pretty reasonable rate if you ask me in this market. Now they're on variable. So when rates start to drop, their rate's going to drop as well.
Yeah. Okay. And then it's just up to you to keep on top of it, right? To say, hey guys, my interest rate's dropped. What's going on? Why is the bank not dropped my rate?
Yeah.
I particularly heard that with the big 4 kind of banks, that they've just sort of not wanted to continue, and subsequently they've sort of increased the rate, and they're not negotiating on it. They're just saying, well, this is the rate that you're going to pay, and yes, it may come down when and if rates get cut, but that's what I've sort of heard as well.
That's definitely what I'm seeing for SMSF lending. So 4 or 5 years ago, all the big banks used to do it. They used to give SMSF loans. They stopped 4 or 5 years ago. But what they've done is they've kept their rates as they are. So a lot of people who still have SMSF loans with the big 4 banks, with St. George, Macquarie, their rates are looking like you're around 9 or 10%. If you have an SMSF loan that's with one of those lenders, please refinance immediately. There are other lenders that are offering much lower rates. You can save yourself a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah. And that's actually a key point, I think, is discerns the difference between a good broker and a bad broker is policies are constantly changing and things are constantly changing in the broking world. What like a CBA was keen as beans 5 years ago to get these brand new SMSF thing going. And now the reality of like, actually, you know what, we don't want that. We're going to write a little policy, and that's going to change the way brokers, how much we charge and we're going to disincentivize it. So that's a great point. Okay, cool. Well, I want to get started and stuck into this SMSF masterclass, because I think it's the core thing is just like, what is it? How does it work? What are the benefits of them? How do they, what are the dangers of them? What are the risks associated to them? And really make this a high value session for people. But before we do that, we got to jump into our sponsor post. But after that, we'll jump straight into it if you're keen.
See you soon.
Hi all, I've got a big problem. This is the Policey Property weekly sponsorship ad. Except today, I've got nothing to sell, and this is because of you. Due to all your kind words, comments, amazing feedback, and sincere compliments about my newly released commercial property investment course, the Commercial Property Institute, I realised today that due to the Facebook algorithm, many of you, in fact, the majority of you, still may not have heard about this yet. So I'm going to do 3 things that no other course provider would even dare to do. Let's start with number 1. I've taken out 5 lessons of the course and put them in the link that's being dropped into the chat right now. This way you can see the value in the course, and you can see the production, and you can see for yourself the depth of the insight that we dive into. Every other course provider hides everything behind a paywall, and you only find out if it's valuable or not when it's too late. Not me, you're going to see 5 sneak peek lessons from the course from which you can make an informed decision about whether this is for you or not. Now, number 2. To further prove to you that this course will transform you from being a total beginner into an elite commercial property investor, I'm going to show you a picture of me before I discovered commercial property investing. And now, after I've discovered commercial property investing. Alright, you finally got your Steve without a beard shot, so it's time to get serious. Let's talk about number 3. And this will leave you without any doubts. Everything I know about commercial property is in this course. Every tool that we use at Policey Property is in the course, and it's delivered in a learn at your own pace online course at $4,997. But you're not going to pay that. In fact, you're not going to pay a cent if you're quick. I've decided to extend the free offer to OzProp Investors Group until the end of June. That's right, no cost, no credit card, lifetime access until the end of June. All you have to do is click the second link here in the chat, and it'll take you to the page where people normally pay $4,997 for it. At this page, type in the discount code OZPROP and instantly get the Commercial Property Institute course for free. No catches, no gimmicks, just a limited time only offer. So click the link right now and get your instant access free. Thanks again for the amazing feedback, and I look forward to seeing thousands of commercial property moguls in the near future. Cheers, guys.
There you go. That ad is way too long. Jeff,
And
you're
kind
on
of
mute.
music. Oh,
What a
who's
great
on
offer,
mute?
though. Gosh, love
Yeah.
Steve. That's amazing.
he's been on your Aaron's podcast like once or twice, and yeah, Aaron's had a lot of people on his podcast. So, anyway, so SMSF, we're getting our engine started. So I sort of got a bit carried away, a bit excited about the lending sort of tips and tactics. But so SMSF, what is it? How does it work? Like, give us, if somebody's not heard of it before, start us from the beginner, and we'll sort of progressively add layers to it.
Perfect. Yeah. So SMSF, it stands for Self-Managed Superfund. So instead of you putting your super contributions to a retail or an industry fund, like Australian Super, Aware Super, something like that, you actually create your own fund. You set it up, you manage it, and you administer it. You are responsible for it.
Okay.
Are you happy for me to keep rolling, Jeff and Joe?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I'll just keep going.
There's no need to prompt us for questions. We will jump straight in and throw them at you.
So why is SMSF getting popular now? The people that I speak to, there's 2 camps. I'll speak to the first camp. It's the people who have picked up their balance from 30 June or coming through soon in the next 3 weeks. They then look back to their balance 3, 4, 5 years ago, and despite the super contributions that they've been putting in every month, the balance is not growing as quickly as they thought. And we are in bull market everywhere. And people are going, what's going on? I'm missing a trick. they delve a little bit deeper and then they just start to think, and we had this discussion in our pre-chat, who is going to manage your money the best for your retirement? In my opinion, I don't think that it's necessarily going to be those fund managers or those account managers. It's you. You know, you can see yourself in that income that you'll be able to receive when you retire. And then when I start to have those discussions with people, they get really excited and they're thinking, actually, you're right. Like, this is something that I've never thought about before. It just goes away in the side. And now when I look at it, it's like so obvious that there's a trick that we're missing. So what can you do with your SMSF? Again, this is not financial advice. This is just us having a chat. So what can you do? Once it's set up, you can invest into anything that you want. Shares, managed funds, index funds, property.
Even crypto.
And crypto if you want. You can do art. You can buy art. You can buy gold. It's the choice is yours. You have to act in a responsible manner for the beneficiaries of the fund. So that'll be you and whoever you set up this SMSF up with. It previously was that you could only have 4 members in an SMSF. You can now have up to 6 members in an SMSF. So it could be possibly, you know, you, your partner, your brother's partner, and, you know, you could sort of combine balances and have 6 balances in there to go out and buy whatever you want.
Can I ask from a lending?
Sorry.
I was going to say, from a lending perspective, what does that sort of look like if you start combining sort of people that may not be in your household, as in you've got your brother, your sort of cousin? What does that look like? Does that start to get a bit messy, or how does that work?
It's not messy. And that's what I love about SMSF lending. It's so easy. And that's what I want to, this is a myth I want to dispel tonight. It's, if we look at an SMSF on its own, so the lender will look at the SMSF, the little circle bucket, who the members are. They'll look at the super contributions that are coming into the bucket every month. They'll look at the rental income for the property or the properties that you will buy. Add that all together, times it by 9, and that will roughly tell you how much of a loan you will get from the bank. It's that simple. So if you've got, say, 4 people in your 4 people in your super fund, take everyone's super contributions for the year, add in the rental income for the property you want to buy, total that up, times it by 9, and it'll tell you roughly what the bank will give you in terms of a loan. It's that simple. You can calculate that on your own. That's
quick. It's quick math. You can do that with it. You don't even. You need
100,000 salary. You get 9,000. I bet isn't super guarantee a little bit more? Aren't we at about 10.5, or have we gone 10.7?
We're actually at 11%, and as of the 1st of July, 1st of July, we're going up to 11.5%, and the 1st of July 2025, we're going up to 12%. So you're actually guaranteed over the next 2 years to have your super contribution increases to go up. So it's a winner.
There's not many guarantees in life, but that is one. There's death and taxes, and that's super guarantee going up. Actually, but having said that, make sure your employer is definitely paying that and kicking that in. So just check your pay slips, everybody. A bit of a public service announcement. This is a bit of a technical question. I know we said we were going to go from beginner to, look, this might be a question for an accountant. So I don't know if you.
Luckily, we brought one along with us.
Oh yeah, I know, but no practicing. So would SMSF be suitable for someone not looking at property investment, but rather the flexibility in specie transfer of shares, ETFs prior to retirement? I mean, I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, like, not financial advice, Gaurav, but yeah, I mean, it gives you so much flexibility. This is also another one. Yeah, so in specie transfers of shares you can do. Another hot tip is if you have commercial property outside of super, that could also be eligible for an in-specie transfer into your super fund as well. So what that would mean is your super fund would buy the commercial property off the owners. You wouldn't pay any stamp duty in the SMSF, but you would obviously have to get the lending or just have the cash outright to buy the property off you. So that's another hot tip as well.
Interesting. Okay, we've got another. The more super contributions, i.e. combining with your partner, for example, the greater the borrowing capacity that you have for purposes of buying residential property. The deposit required is 80% with some lenders.
Yes,
Bit of a
I will just say yes, yes, yes to all of that. So, yep, correct. If you you and your wife set up a super fund, take both of your super contributions together, add the rental income to the property, times it by 9. That's the lending that you're going to get. And yeah, you can. So most lenders, you can go up to 80% LVR for an SMSF property. There are some lenders that allow you to go up to 90%. However, big disclaimer, it comes with a risk fee of about 2.5 to 3.5%. It's a bit high. I don't encourage it unless there's a real proper strategy behind it. So I'd probably recommend to stay 80% at least.
Wow, that's a massive risk fee, 2.5%.
Up to 3.5%. Yeah, so be mindful of that if you do see it.
Wow. Okay. So don't get too scared. It's just the way it is. So what are some of the things that you can't do with an SMSF that you can do? Like what are the not so benefits of it? What are the downsides of an SMSF?
Disadvantages, yeah.
Disadvantages.
Yeah, disadvantages. I mean, it's locked in there, right? If you've got a property outside of super, you can at any point go, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to take the cash. I'm going to pay off my owner OC.
Yep.
We
Buy a
can't
nice car.
buy a nice
Yeah.
car, buy a boat, go to the Maldives, whatever the dream is. If it's in super, it's there until you reach the preservation age, or unless there's extenuating circumstances. At the moment, preservation age by the ATO is 60. So you have to reach 60 before you can access those funds. Being mindful though, like for us, I think the preservation age will go up. So we're all living longer, and yeah, it's going to have to. So yeah, just being mindful of it, that will go up. What are the other disadvantages? I mean, I'm trying to think because obviously I'm a very passionate SMSF enthusiast.
Can I throw one in there?
Yeah, please, Jeff.
We're really big. We love a good renovation here in Oz Property. Joe and I are both. That's probably the one thing that would concern me a little. Not concern me, but would restrict me somewhat. But I suppose then I could buy my reno properties outside of super. Because is there a way you can't necessarily improve a property? You can bring it back to the original, or not original, but you can repair stuff, but you can't improve it. Is my understanding correct? And that's the
right.
sole purpose test. Is that? I mean, am I getting
Correct.
that right?
So it's called the single acquirable asset test by the ATO. So it is a mouthful. The ATO loves lots of words. We can't do any structural renovations to properties in SMSF. So we can do repairs. They're totally fine. Think new paint, new carpet, new roof, even something like that. We cannot do structural. We cannot add a bedroom. We cannot add a bathroom. We cannot do construction with lending. So that's where it gets a little bit restrictive.
Yeah, because you can put a granny flat on the back of your property, but most people get a granny flat and they lend and borrow the money to put a granny flat on. But in an SMSF, you cannot borrow extra funds to be able to do that. So it has to be from the cash contribution. So you have to have, 200K cash to be able to add that extra value. What about subdivision? Like if we buy the block, knock it down, subdivide it, split it into 3 blocks, build some units on that, can we do that type of thing?
My understanding is no, but please check with your accountant. And the reason is because the ATO sees that as you carrying on a business and like creating property or subdividing property to create wealth and running a business. So that's a no. And then the other one is that's a big downside is we cannot release equity from a property in SMSF. So say we buy a property, 80% loan, and we're paying it down. It's principal and interest over 30 years, and we get to 5 years' time. We've paid it down a bit, but the value's grown. You cannot come to me and say, Bernie, I now want to release some equity. I will say, no, not allowed. So that's why I think for SMSF, one, the loan structure and the loan strategy is super important. We really do want to try to get you to maximize that lending at the beginning. So sitting at that 80% LVR, because we cannot release any more equity beyond that. And then also the property strategy, and you guys would know this. If it's in an SMSF, we do want it to be a fairly good quality stock property. We don't want it to have too much work that's going to need to be done to it. We can claim depreciation. So if it's a newer property, there's going to be more depreciation we can claim. So property strategy, loan strategy is going to be super critical for the SMSF.
And then depreciation, though, from a tax perspective, being at the lower tax threshold, like does that change the equation from a depreciation standpoint? Maybe that's a question for our next guest that we're having on talking about depreciation. But does that make sense? Like, because the tax benefit is 15%, if you get a depreciation on an asset, is that what makes sense?
Yeah, I think you're making sense. Are you kind of saying, like, do you get to only do the 15% because what's the income of the SMSF? Is that what you're talking about, Joe? Or is it income of individuals?
Does depreciation work in the same way in an SMSF as it does outside of an SMSF?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty certain it does, but that's definitely a good question for everyone's accountants to ask them. But I always think about, whenever I look at my SMSF financials that come through at the end of every year, it's the income that comes through. So it'll be rental income, super contributions. You take off the expenses that are related to the fund. So think your accounting fees, auditor fees, water, rates, notices, interest, depreciation. Then after that, you have the proceeds to the fund. So what was left over, and then you're taxed on 15% of that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
This is a good one, and we'll go. I want to start talking to some of the mechanics of it, because for those people who may sort of just be learning about SMSF, I think even myself, like, I love to sort of brush up. Will the repairs? I think this is a question asked in the pre-live posts. Will the repairs amount paid by the SMSF account or individual have to bear the out of pocket? How does that work?
Yeah, it comes out of the SMSF account. So once it's owned in the SMSF, that entity, the trust, is responsible for all expenses related to the trust. So that comes with a disclaimer. If you don't have any extra money in your super fund, and you've got, I don't know, the roof caves in and you don't have insurance, say we're talking apocalypse situation, you will then need to get money into the SMSF to pay for that. So either through a concessional contribution or non-concessional contribution. And maybe if I'll just dive into that so people have a bit of an understanding. So concessional contributions, this is before tax. So this is what your employer pays to you. It can also be anything that you salary sacrifice into super before tax. The limit for this financial year is 27.5, so 27,500. Yep. And then next year, the limit will be 30,000. Then the second way to get money into super is via non-concessional contributions. So after tax, the limit this financial year is $110,000. So think, I don't know, you sell a car, you've got 20 grand lying around, you can put that into your super via a non-concessional contribution.
Do you get a tax refund back, like a franking credit in a way for that, because it's post-tax?
It's a great question. I will not answer that. I will leave that to the accountant to answer.
No, that's
I would love to, because like
Joe,
you just paid 35% or 40% tax on that asset. I want my
this is what we're going to Jeremy for, Joe. We need to get Jeremy on to answer these technical. Jeremy would eat these questions for breakfast.
Totally.
He's watching the footy now, though. I'm sure. I want to talk to, because this is, I think the lending is your real niche, and you're absolutely a dynamite with the lending side of SMSF. So I want to know, when you sort of set it up, because there's a perception, word on the street, you need that 200K, you need a statement of advice. Like, what does that all look like from a lender's kind of perspective?
Yeah, so you used to. So going back a few years ago, the minimum required balance was 200,000, and you did need an SOA, a statement of advice from a financial advisor. You don't need that anymore. So some of the lenders we work with do not have a minimum balance, but you just need enough to make it viable. So if we're thinking like, let's say you want to buy a $500,000 property. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back to the statement of advice before I forget. You do not need a statement of advice as well, okay? Just usually the support of a good accountant. So let's go back to the question about how much is then good. If the lenders are saying you don't need a minimum balance, how much can we make work? So let's talk through, can we talk through some numbers, like an example?
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think that's going to paint
I love
the picture clearer.
examples.
That'd be great.
Amazing. Okay, so let's say we want to buy a $500,000 property in super, okay?
Mhm.
We want a 20% deposit, that's 100 grand.
Yeah.
We want to pay stamp duty, which is about 18 in Queensland, and we're paying bank and legal fees of about 5K. So a little bit more, but it's a one-off. So all up, 118.5, that's $123,000 that you need to kick in to make a $500,000 property work. So I'm seeing people, if you've got that balance of 130 to 140, you can buy a good quality property at 500. I am also still talking to people who have a balance of about 120, and we're trying to see how we can get that 450 purchase work for them as well. So people with as little, I'm talking to people with as little as 120,000 that are like, I'm in, I need to make this happen.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so 120,000, you can start to kick things off and get rolling. And that's also not 120,000 that you have. It's 60,000 that you have, and then 60,000 that your spouse has. So it's one of those things, like when I was starting out putting money away, piddly little money away into my super, I'm like, well, I'm never going to have enough. I've only got $50,000. Well, yeah, your powers combined, you can do some. So 120 is that kind of limit that you're seeing. It's a solid threshold. But also, like I think it was Grav was mentioning about other assets. You can still get a self-managed super fund for less than $120,000 and invest in other assets while that happens. While you're building up that asset base. Okay.
Because
so
really, I think what you need to think about for SMSF is it's a trust, which I always think about trust as circles. And then usually you have a trustee on top, and I think of them as triangles. So you got a trustee company sitting on top and a trust that's a circle. That's what an SMSF is. In the triangle, you've got, it's the visual. I'm a visual. Oh, I got love hearts. It's the visual that I love. So in the triangle, you've got the directors of the company. So if it's me and my husband, Aaron, for example, we would be directors. Then of the trust, we would be the beneficiaries. So we'd be sitting at the bottom getting the benefit of the trust. So that is all it is.
It's that simple, yeah? Like the way I like to think about the SMSF is it's a completely different legal entity that's got very little to do with you. You get the benefit, 67-year-old, 60, because it's probably going to be by the time that we get to that point, like whatever age you are, right?
Yeah,
84 and a half it will be by the time
70, 60, 70, right? It is that version, the old wrinkled version of you is going to get the benefit, of it. But it's a completely different entity, and it needs to be treated like a whole new company, asset trust. Yes, you are the beneficiary of it, but it's like I had a client, someone that was like, cool, I'm going to go buy a sports car. And he went so far down this, he's like, no, it's a collectible sports car. And he's like, it's this Dodge Challenger. No, he was doing it. He went it. He's like, I'm not going to buy a property, Joe. I'm going to go down the Dodge Challenger route. And I'm like, okay, cool, mate. Let me know how that goes, because I don't think you can. And he comes back to be like 6 months later. He's like, so yeah, you can't do it. He's like, I had to have storage. I couldn't store it at my friend's house. I'm like, you were thinking about storing it at your friend's house? Like, yeah, I'll overcome that problem. I'll store it at my friend's house. So yes, the asset it can just not be any benefit. Even if you have a rental property, you cannot rent it as an individual. You can't go, I mean, you can go visit it to fix things, but you can't get any benefit whatsoever from the self-managed super fund. It's just like your normal super balance. You can't touch it. Don't touch it.
That's right. But could I jump in and say there is a structure that works for a lot of self-employed or business owners where their SMSF actually buys the property that they rent, and their business will lease the property off their SMSF.
Oh, so, wow.
To me, that's like there is so much layers of benefit and everything going on, but it is totally allowed. And I've got a lot of self-employed clients that like look to that because they're like, you're paying rent wherever you are.
Yeah, they can't afford. They got 300,000 just sat there ready to buy a commercial asset, but yeah.
And then you think about the rent that you pay to your landlord, and they're going, hey, I can actually buy this property in my SMSF, redirect this rent, and just pay myself for my future wrinkly me.
Yeah. I think we probably have not skirted. We've mentioned this question. I'll bring it up again. If you buy a property under an SMSF, will it affect the borrowing capacity of your personal borrowing capacity, or are they separate as they are different? And I believe the answer is they are different. But yeah,
They're
is that correct?
different and they're separate.
Yeah, two
Correct.
completely separate things. There is you as the individual, and then you are creating a brand new entity called a self-managed super fund entity, and that is completely separate to you. Yes, you are eventually future you is the beneficiary, but you're not future you, so you can't get any benefit of this thing. So it's a completely separate entity. So the only way that the SMSF would affect you is sorry, I'm kind of jumping in, Bernadette. See you, Jeff. Jeff's had enough as well. The only reason why that would affect you is if it goes to the balance goes to zero and you need to get called upon to be the one to put the money in, and then you lose the personal dollars to be able to push forward to get your lending going. So
correct. Yeah, exactly.
Like butchered that a little bit. So I guess the thing is, when you're thinking about these SMSF lendings, what are the type of assets that you are seeing people buy in the self-managed super funds? Like, because you do have to be a little bit more, hey, Jeff, you do have to be a little bit more strategic in your purchasing. What type of assets are people buying?
Yeah, definitely. I can see that question from Dan, and it's a really valid question. I think it goes back to what I said earlier about we don't want anything that needs too much maintenance. So it has to be a newer type of property, a fairly decent build. If you're thinking it's going to be like a little Renault project you can do, that's not the case at all. So that's going to be my advice. And then obviously,
Exactly. Like for me, so my property investing strategy personally is buy an old ugly rundown house that has some development potential, where I can renovate it now, add a fourth bedroom and second bathroom to take it from a $600,000 to an $800,000 property with a renovation, extract the equity, and then go buy another property with that. And then I will have that. Then I will subdivide and develop off. That entire strategy doesn't work in the self-managed super fund. So it's you're coming from a strictly different angle. There was this, how do you, so this was just as you said, the self-managed super fund extract equities. Like, how do you extract equity from this is how do you extract equity from a commercial asset in self-managed super fund to continue to grow the portfolio is the only option to release the gain through selling, refinancing restricted dollar to dollar. So I guess it's kind of like the same thing with what we're saying. But commercial is the exact same situation. You can't extract the equity out and go again. So we can't even go into commercial to get that.
Correct. Yeah, there's just a strict rule. There's no releasing of equity, which is a real shame, I think, in my opinion. ATO, hear us now. We want to release equity from our SMSF properties. But yeah, same thing for commercial residential, it's the same thing. And so, how do you realize that money? So it's either by you slowly paying down the asset and then that property in the SMSF, just that rental income coming through, or at some point selling the property and realizing the cash.
And I wanted to bring this one up because I know Joe loves how much he loves house and land packages, noted by his meme the other week. What typically do you see? I don't know if you asked this when Dan was talking about it, but do many people? No, it's not me. It's Joe. Like I'm like you can potentially. Yeah, sure. So do you see many people go down this path and buy that in their?
Yeah, so it's again going back to that single acquirable asset. If it's a house and land, two separate contracts cannot do. If it is a turnkey and the builder is building the house for you and you buy that as it's newly complete on one contract, that is A-OK. That's all about lending.
Do you see it's a bit risky because have you seen it happen where a builder has said, well, okay, you've got a fixed price contract. However, I need you to tip in. I need an extra 20, 30K. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to do this build. How does that work with an SMSF? Have you seen that happen?
Well, you can't get any lending for construction in SMSF. So if you have built something in your SMSF and your builder says, hey, I need 20, 30, 40K more, you need to find that money and you need to get it into your SMSF. And then the restrictions with that, obviously with those concessional and non-concessional caps, you can't go over those caps without extra tax or penalties being paid. So being really mindful of where you are with all those.
I love that you're giving this to us, warts and all. You're not simply saying, okay, only buy an SMSF. You're actually saying, and this is really impactful for people who just sort of see an ad and think, okay, SMSF is great. But it's important that's why important to have people like Bernadette and your accountant sort of working hand in sort of glove to make sure that you're getting all the ducks lined up. Otherwise, you may sort of find yourself in a bit of a pickle down the track. What we haven't really touched on is what do interest rates look like in SMSF lending?
Yeah, so they're about a 1% higher than residential investment rates. So we're seeing what they're sitting at about the moment, mid to high sixes. So you're looking about mid sevens at the moment for SMSF lending. And some people like, oh my God, that's too high. But I really like to remind people, you are in an environment in your SMSF where you pay 15% tax. Like, you can pay a little bit higher rate because your tax rate is so low. So you give and you take.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's well, maybe it's not riskier for the banks, but apparently they think it is. But also, like, when you start getting into trust lending, is like, I just got a loan under a company trust situation set up. It's 7.29% interest on principal and interest only, principal and interest. That's large. And then I see people with SMSF lending at 7.5. I'm like, well, it's not much more. It's not much more.
It's not that much more. And you think about, what you earn in your company trust, that's like 30% tax, right?
True. Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. And the other way.
Yeah.
The way I like to think about this sort of thing is where you've got a property that may be rented for 400, but it should be rented for 450. Yes, that is costing you a little bit, but you're actually, once you sort of are able to, if you can buy that property for 30K under, and Joe says all the time as well, then you're actually making, instead of 5 times 5, you're costing yourself 2,500 and you're making up to sort of 30,000 on the buy. I mean, I just crunch the numbers and decide which one works for you rather than sort of saying, okay, the interest rate's 1% higher. What does that actually look like? And I'm sure you do that every day with your clients and sort of look at it and do that comparison. What I wanted to say is, because this is a great question from Guru. Again, he's asking some great questions tonight. He said, what's your view on some of the online SMSF providers providing full service, including accounting, setup, admin, and chess brokerage? Does that create havoc for you, or is that easy for you? How does that work with the broker?
I mean, for me, I've had a few clients look at some of those providers. They're great, like super low cost. I have doubts about if they can actually help when you go to buy a property and get lending, because something we haven't touched on is the actual structure and the setup of SMSF lending. So when you do,
well, that's what I wanted to touch. This comment came through, and is the first thing you need to know, because this is someone that's been down the path. The first thing you need to know when you go down the SMSF path is not about a property manager. It's not about a buyer's agent or a broker. They come later. The most important thing is a phenomenal accountant.
Can I actually disagree with this question and give you an example why I am totally biased? I would hate for someone to go, I'm setting up an SMSF with their accountant. They pay their $3-4 grand setup fees. Oh. Then they come to the mortgage broker and the broker goes, sorry, mate, you can't borrow anything. So my suggestion is that you actually do speak to a good broker who knows SMSF lending. You go, these are my super contributions. This is my balance. What can I do? I do this all the time with my clients. And I go, great, this is where you sit. This is how much you can borrow. This is the purchase price. And at that point, if we're like tick, then you go to your accountant, you pay your $3 or $4 grand, set up the SMSF. You are not out of pocket for having one conversation before you chat to your accountant.
Good. Solid. 100%. Okay, there you go. Boom. I like that. So the key point that I was trying to get, what I read from that is it needs to be a phenomenal accountant. And it kind of raised like a question for me of why a phenomenal accountant? Like, how do you mess this up? So like, what is a good accountant doing that's different to a bad accountant to set up like an SMSF is an SMSF, is it? Or is there other things? Can I do a $5,000, like a $2,000 online one, or do I have to go to a big, spend $8,000 with an accountant? Like, what's the difference between a good SMSF and a bad SMSF, or an accountant? I don't know. What is that?
I mean, in my personal experience, accountants do a phenomenal job for us, but I have noticed that there are differences in accounting types or accounting like mindsets. I feel like you can go to an accountant who is all about tax minimization, which is amazing. That's so very critical. But when you're in that point where you're aggressively accumulating property and you're on this warpath, you're like, this is like the next 10 years, I've got to go. Like we've got to make this happen. If you're with an accountant or any professionals around you that are giving you advice, and if they're leaning on the more conservative side, or they don't share the same values or direction that you do, they're going to hinder you. And that's why I think it's really important to share with the people that you're working with, the accountants, conveyancers, solicitors, buyers agents. This is the plan. Like, I'm on the warpath. We're making this happen. Passive income all the way, baby. And get everyone on the same page, because if we know where you're at, we're like, okay, we're already thinking, okay, this property, this one, next one. And that's how you make it happen. I'm getting too excited.
Yeah.
No, it's so the passion is amazing. Like that's where we usually have some of the best conversations. So those people that go on, Joe.
Yeah, well, it's so true. Like, you have to articulate this to your team. No one's going to tell this to you. No one's going to tell you need to go flat out hard and fast, because they'll get in trouble. You can't just tell people to go crazy. It's up to you to be able to tell them, like, this is the speed and pace that I want to go. How do I make this happen? How do we push forward through to this? And your team will then say, hell yeah, let's make this happen. Or it'll be like, no, you don't need to do that. We'll listen to their advice of why you don't need to do it, or maybe change the team member if they're not willing to do that. But have like a structured approach of, like, I see so many people getting personal properties and then also SMSF properties at the same time because they're doing exactly that. They're going for it and trying to make it happen.
It's the old it makes if it's meant to be, it's up to me to some extent. Like if nobody else cares enough as much about your money as you do, hopefully. What I wanted to say is there's been some great questions come through. Is there a limit of properties you can have in your SMSF, or is the limit based on the total value of the SMSF?
Great question.
That's a great question. So you're limited by your super balance. And so, because that's going to make up the 20% deposit, cover the stamp duty and costs. So whatever your super balance
from the bottom standpoint, we're limited from like the bottom standpoint. Okay.
Yep, correct. And then you're going to be limited by your contributions and then the rental income from the property, because at some point you will reach a limit. But I mean, it really depends on your personal position. Like, I'm speaking to some clients who have, they're in a very good position, 700,000 sitting, and we're planning to do, 3 properties at once. So yeah, it's very individual.
There's another question that popped up. What is the maximum limit of assets or cash allowed in an SMSF before it gets affected by the extra tax and charges? I heard someone say a figure of $3 million. Do you know anything about that? It's a very much an accounting question. So if you don't know the answer.
It is an accounting question, but yeah, the ATO passed some new legislation this year about the tax rate. So once your assets reach, I believe it is $3 million, then there are some different tax rates that are involved. Definitely one to speak to your accountant about. But remember, we have to get our asset position to a $3 million base before that comes an issue. And then if it is an issue, well, we're only paying up, from what I understand, 30% tax anyway on the additional income past the 3 mil.
Wow. I mean, it's gone from 15 to 30. That's doubled the tax rate. But 3 million asset really isn't that much money. But it is very much a rich person's problem. Oh no, I've got $3 million worth. Okay, cool. Now you got to figure something else out.
Correct. Exactly. But yeah, definitely one for your accountant.
I wanted to sorry. I reckon this would be a good one, because you've probably seen a couple in your time as a broker, and even in the team as well. How have you sort of seen people think about SMSF, like the more sophisticated investors? Do they think as a long term, okay, I'm going to buy this, going to be a great asset? I think you mentioned this earlier in the conversation.
Absolutely. I'd suggest it is a long-term hold property for a couple of reasons. So one of them is the ATO has a capital gains discount. So I'll take a step back. There's two phases of super. So phase one is the phase that the three of us are in. We're in accumulation phase. We're working and we're contributing super. We're accumulating super. The second stage is pension phase. That's when we hang up the boots, we're going to the Maldives, we're sitting, relaxing with a pina colada, and we've now reached the pension phase where we're now taking that money out of super and paying ourselves that pension every week, right? So two phases. So when we're in accumulation phase, if we sell a property, the ATO has said we will give you a CGT discount. So if you've held the property for 12 months, in super, yep. So if you've held the property for 12 months, say we bought it for 500, 12 months time we sell it for 600, really rough numbers, we've made $100,000 gain. Instead of taxing us on that full 100,000, the ATO gives us a 1/3 discount, and they say you have to pay tax on the rest, on the 2/3. So instead of paying 15% tax on 100,000, you're paying 15% tax on 2/3 of that, which is 67,000.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then we're at 15%.
And we're at 15%.
Which is about 9,000 approximately. Maybe it's about 10,120 roughly. Yep.
Correct.
Round numbers.
Yeah. So there's some rough figures. So I definitely suggest it would be one that you would definitely hold for at least 12 months to get access to that discount. But because of what's involved, you do want to hold that for the long term. And then when you move into pension phase, there's totally different tax rates altogether. Please confirm with your accountant. But if you do sell an asset, sometimes there's no capital gains tax payable at all.
When you do sell an asset, there's no capital gains tax at all.
Depending on the stage.
In the pension phase.
Why?
Well, because that's to fund your retirement. Because what the government is rewarding you, Joe, for holding that. Because if you just go in, make $1 million in 10 years, sell that, but then what do you do with that what do you do with that $1 million? If you've sort of held an asset and then to retirement, and then what will happen is then, okay, you're not relying on the age pension. So the government's rewarding you for building that nest egg, and then sort of saying, okay, if you hold this and don't sort of fritter away by go and buy the latest crypto or whatever it is.
You're not taxed on the income that's produced from it, not actually, but selling it in the income is the same thing, right?
No. So yeah, I think that's what Bernadette's saying.
Yeah. So when you go to the pension phase, you've retired, you've hung up the boots. So we obviously get this all checked out by your accountant, and also disclaimer: by the time we retire, they could change the tax rules.
Yeah, everything's completely different.
It's 30 years time for us at least. So when you get to that pension phase, there's no capital gains tax payable on the sale of that asset. I'm fairly certain, but please check with your accountant.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm just looking it up now. Once in the retirement phase, any capital gains from the sale of assets supporting the pension are tax free. This is according to.
So this is where it gets so interesting for people in their 50s and early 50s, late 50s, where you have a real opportunity here to do something pretty special. Because if you can buy an asset and then in 10 years, you could then sell in your personal name for a 50% tax, or it's in your SMSF is going to get charged. You can pop that in there tax free. That's super interesting. Zero tax.
Zero. And even I would say even not in your 50s, you're in your 40s. Like you hold this property, you buy a good one, best possible location you can for what we can afford, pretty new, so upkeep. You keep it for 20 years. That growth, if it's done its job, jackpot, 0% tax. I love it.
Because it can change.
The other
it
thing
can change. Yes,
it will change. That's the answer. It will change. It'll completely change. Everything will shift. This conversation is not relevant in 20 years' time.
Correct.
But take advantage of why you can.
We're doing your recording then, guys, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll see you in 30 years, guys. A pension phase has no capital gains tax and no tax on earnings, according to Grav. Don't trust people on the internet. Confirmed by Retire Right podcast. Okay, even he's passing the buck.
We'll sue those.
Okay, cool. So I think one of the things that I find, so I was having a chat. I wish I'd asked him to give me the spreadsheet, because he was a guy today who is purchasing in his SMSF. Super exciting. I actually told him about this session. I said, you need to be on this one. And he had a spreadsheet that mapped out the difference between, okay, I'm going to stay with my super fund. And then if I invest in property over the long term, and it was pretty much everything. The super fund actually beat property in the first 4 years. And then it just went exponentially ridiculous. And he was only running at a 4.5% yield. And I think it was like a 4 or 5% growth rate. And by the end of it, he had a $700,000 difference, because he wasn't getting charged all these ridiculous fees from the super fund. Like, that is the biggest thing. Super funds charge ridiculous fees. And it might just sound like 1 to 2%, but it's a lot of money when you've got money in there. And then there's fees on the actual assets that they've purchased. It's ridiculous. Where was I going with that? Oh, the point is you can get pretty creative with the way that you purchase things in here as well. When you sell an asset, so we had Jeremy Nizelli on, and I don't know if he said this on the episode or if he said it off the episode, but I don't think you'll mind us telling you. He bought a property and then decided to sell it, right? So he made a large capital gains over a number of years. So you can still do that, but he's only paying 15% tax on that capital gains. But he's like, well, there was a better asset elsewhere. You can't run a business where you just keep flipping. But if there's a better opportunity, you can exit an asset and then jump out into another one. Yeah, I hope Jeremy doesn't mind me saying that now that I've.
All right, well, I'll ask him after the show, Joe, and if he doesn't, then we'll have to. Yeah, so that's a good point. I want to know, because I don't think we've really touched on this. It's about time frame to set up an SMSF. I imagine there's more time and more paperwork, more admin. We all love admin, but it's all part of the process. So what does it take generally for an SMSF to be kind of worked through from a broking perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it'd be 6 weeks would be the time frame, and I can give maybe a quick overview or a roadmap of what that would look like. You would speak to your broker first, and you'd find out if you have the borrowing to purchase what you want to purchase. Then when you get the green tick, you go into your accountant, you're setting up the SMSF trust and the corporate trustee. That's the structure that you're going for. When we have those details, you then can set up your SMSF bank account. So you're literally going to have a bank account. You're going to request the rollover from your current super fund into the SMSF bank account. So you're literally going to have a login detail and be able to see those funds sitting there. And then during that process, we are applying for the pre-approval and making that happen. So if you're moving quite quickly, if you've got all your paperwork and following up that circle around you, then I'd say 6 weeks, and I've seen people do it quicker than that as well. Typically, what takes the longest is the rollover from your retail fund or your whatever fund you're with. They don't want to lose you, so they like to delay that process. It's usually sometimes 3 to 4 weeks, even though it's meant to be a bit quicker.
Right. Okay. So they've got like SLAs where they don't have to do it for 4 weeks or something like that, and they hope you change your mind within that time, but they just hold on to it. How does the Bear Trust come into all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really wanted to talk about that because it's I think once people understand the structure of their SMSFs and the entities that they're going to have, it makes the whole thing a lot easier. So we've already spoken about the SMSF on its own is the circle, it's the trust, and then it's the corporate trustee, the triangle that sits above it. So what the ATO said is, okay, we'll let you guys borrow money to buy property, but we want to protect any assets that you have in your SMSF. So to do that, we're going to make you set up a second trust called a Bear Trust or a custodian trust. So the whole purpose of that is to hold the property that you buy. That Bear Trust is going to also have a corporate trustee above it. So why has the ATO said that? So let's say, I'm going to talk like a very worst case scenario. Say in your SMSF, back to the first trust, you and your partner both lose your job, your super contributions stop coming in. Your rental income for the property stops because the tenants have trashed it. Then you deplete all your money in the SMSF. The bank is going to seize that property. right? And this is assuming you can't sell it because the property's been trashed and you don't have insurance. The lender is going to seize that property and they're going to sell it and they're going to clear their debts.
Okay.
The ATO does not want that lender to then also to be able to come after any other assets that you would have in your SMSF. So if you've got shares sitting there, cash, crypto, art, whatever it is. So it is to protect you. It is to protect everything else that you have in your super fund.
Great idea. That makes sense. Very well explained.
To trust
the government.
SMSF company, always think about it like a sorting hat on top, controlling the company, bear trust, company trustee on top of the bear trust. Write it on a spreadsheet and then you'll never forget it.
Then the only caveat around, not caveat, but what happens if can they pierce the corporate veil if you do something something fraudulent, so to speak? Is that how does that work in SMSF?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. I mean, when you set up an SMSF, you've got obligations. Like you are essentially what they say, the trustee. You're the protector of the trust.
Yep.
If you don't act in a way that protects the beneficiaries, you get into trouble. So the ATO will come after you and fine you. They'll mark you as non-compliant. They can fine you. And fines are like, instead of you being taxed at 15% in your super, they'll tax you up to 46.5%. It's pretty serious. So like, it's definitely like, I always like to preface to go, you got to be on top of your paperwork. You got to understand it's a commitment, and it's a commitment. Once it's set up, you got to see it through.
Yeah, I don't feel like this is for the lax, like the lazy person, right? This is not something for someone who's like, like I hate paperwork, don't get me wrong, but it's not one of those people that just like, I don't do paperwork. This is not for me. There is a little bit of admin that goes along with this. Actually, why am I saying that? What does that look like? When you own an SMSF, what does the admin requirements look like and how much do we need to be dedicating to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So so throughout the year, so maybe we'll start off at the beginning. So beginning, there's a lot involved with the setup. If you're buying a property, the usual loan, settlement, purchase, all that sort of jazz. Mm-hmm. Then when the property runs into maintenance mode, you'll be paying sort of like regular bills, like your rates, your water. Then it's really at the end of the year. So once the financial year is done, you're going to have to provide a whole heap of documents to your accountant. They are going to do financials and tax returns for you. That will then get audited. So it goes to an independent auditor, and that has to happen every year. So that's something, to be mindful of, that just like you do your individual or your company tax returns, just chuck in your SMSF into that as well. They'll give you a list of all the documents you need to provide, and usually it can be pretty straightforward. But again, every year that's a commitment you need to make, because if you don't do your tax returns, your fund will be marked as non-compliant until you get those up to date.
Yeah, and you have to make sure that you're paying all the invoices and you have all the receipts for everything.
Correct. Yep. Keep it all in a Google Drive, wherever you keep your cloud-based stuff. It's
not the shoebox these days. I wanted to, do people want to hear about trusts? Because a really interesting, we're not going to have a whole session on trusts and different structures, but Jai's asked this really interesting question. Like he said, I'm trying to bring it up now. There we go. Can the triangle circle model, isolating personal situation, work outside of SMSF if serviceability is a problem? And I think that'll be something we can talk. Do people want to see that? I think we need to go to our last sponsor for the evening, and then should we get to that?
Yeah, I think we've got an absolute legend in the broking space. So how do we keep it? How do we keep this gravy train going?
At least 10, 15.
There's nothing worse than going into a situation unprepared, especially when that situation is purchasing one of the most expensive assets of your life against a trained property expert in the form of a real estate agent. It's a scary thought. but it is a skill that can be taught. Do you want to learn how to become fully prepared when buying a property so you can get out there, buy your dream home or investment property without the fear of actually messing it up? Scott Agate, the founder and expert property negotiator at Hello House, has been helping people buy their properties by stepping in and negotiating with the agents and saving his clients tens of thousands, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars. Scott has now decided to share all that he's learned over the past 28 years in real estate so you can go out there and do the exact same thing on how to find a property, analyze that property, negotiate on that property, and transact on it to get the best results. He's created the Get Buyer Ready course, which is a step-by-step guide on how you too can become an expert property negotiator. It's the easy way of how you can avoid all of these agent games and get the best purchase price on that dream home or your investment property. The course is in short bites for busy people with no fluff at all. Just all the information you need to get buyer ready and secure that next property with confidence at the best price. Scott has been kind enough to give our community a massive discount with the link below. Sign up today before you even think about putting an offer on that next property, and it will be one of the best decisions you ever make. One of the best decisions you ever make.
Yeah, it's great. So I've been told there's been given a bit of a wind up. So let's get through structures and trusts. What is the key differences, I suppose, between self-managed super fund and trusts and structures? I can imagine a couple, but from a lending perspective, what does it look like?
Yeah, so I mean, it is actually really similar to what we've spoken about. It's just outside of super. So you can have the same structure, that trust structure outside of super with a company trustee. You have the trust as the borrower and the purchaser of the property. Now, the real benefit of that structure outside of super is once that trust is trading profitably, so once the rental income is meeting the commitments of the interest, the water bills, rates, everything related, and your accountant will give you an accountant's letter that says this trust is trading profitably and able to meet its commitments. Say that loan's with CBA, we could go to another lender and we provide that accountant's letter and then do not have to declare that loan. So it is another structure and something we're talking a lot with our investor clients about, because if you can buy the right property, at the moment it may not be cash flow positive, but when rates are coming down, if you've bought the right properties, it could be close to that. And your accountants are going to write you that letter. We can put the lending in those trusts, and I don't want to say hide it, but in a way hide it, and go out to other lenders and go again.
I think rather than hiding, because I think it's more about considering that it's paying for itself. So essentially, you don't need to factor it in because it's not going to give you a concern. That's the way I like to think about it.
Not going concern.
Not going to give you too much of a concern if it's already if it's fairly positively geared or positive.
That's a great way to describe it, Jeff. And the reason why we're comfortable with that is because when lenders take loans into their serviceability calculations, they're never taking the interest rate as it is. So say, Joe, you've got that property you've just bought, it's at 7.29%. They're not putting 7.29% in your calculator. They're adding a buffer to that, usually of 2 or 3%. So they're calculating that you're making that loan repayment based on 9 or 10%. It's just not accurate, right? So if we can just get that letter, say it's taking care of itself, it's washing its face, then we can move on to the next one.
Yeah. That's actually a very good point, actually, because even if it's cash flow positive, even if you have if you have that property, right, so pretty much what you're saying is you put a property in a trust and it's cash flow positive and the accountant says it's at $0, you can put it aside. But if you own that property in your individual name, even if it's cash flow positive, the bank is still applying a buffer of 3% on top of that, positive cash flow, which then turns that property from a positive into a negative cash flow, and then that affects your serviceability.
And to just add a final thing on top, they also shade the rental income. So they never take 100% of your rental income. They shade it by about 20%. So they're only taking usually about 80% of the rental income. So they shade you on the income, they increase on the liabilities. And that's when you start to get to, hey, I'm reaching a cap, but I've actually chosen really good properties and they're washing their face. I don't understand.
How long has this been around, like as an option for people? Like, has this been 10, 20, 30 years or is this a relatively new thing?
This has been around, but I feel like we've gotten to a position where people have maxed out their borrowing with buying property in their individual name. And they're like, I'm still want to keep going. And they're like, what is the way? And when there's a will, there's a way. And this is now the way that we're talking about.
I feel like it's like trust used to be one of those things that's just for the wealthy, where they used to, hide things, and the wealthy would hide all their money into the trust and then distribute to their kids. And then the government, everyone started jumping in on the trust situation, and then they changed the rules and it's kind of, I feel like we're getting to that point again to where the normal everyday investor is now seeing an opportunity of the lending restrictions to be able to do something, and everyone's jumping in. I wonder when the government's going to start jumping in and taking this away from people. Do you think that that's going to happen?
I mean, that's such a great question, but like I look at property investors and what they do, whether they buy in an individual name or a company or a trust, you're providing a home for someone. Like, you're a landlord for someone, you're providing. And if you take that ability away from people to continue to buy property, invest in property, create those assets for people to live in, when we already have such a supply shortage, that would just, I think it would kill. It makes no sense for me for them to do that.
Okay. Yeah. For the next 5 years, right? But in 5-10 years time, the supply situation is going to change, because we're going to go crazy. We're going to build all these houses and then we're going to have an oversupply and go through the typical property cycle.
Yeah,
I think we need to get Cameron Murray on. I'd love to hear him speak about housing affordability, and he's written a couple of books. He's a really interesting kind of, not as interesting as you, Bernadette. So I hope he's not watching this, because otherwise he won't come on. But I wanted to ask this question, because I think it's sort of for those people that have gotten to the stage where they might be able to leave their job, or they're getting to retirement age. People who have got financial independence to retire early. I love the fire. There's like flamingo fire, there's flat fire, there's so many different variations of fire these days. Look it up. Without a job that has cash flow, will it be harder to get a loan rather than earning the same amount by selling time for money? How does that look in an SMSF, for example? Is there ways around that you've helped people or think?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine if you don't have a job, then there's no super contributions going in. So whatever we service, the loan we get has to service off the rental income of the property. So as long as we can show something there, we might be able to get a small loan, but we will need at the moment those super contributions to really get you up into a meaningful type of property.
Because I'd imagine, I'm not saying people should do this, but what you could potentially do is like speak to your accountant and all those, and speak to your broker first before you set up the SMSF. What you could potentially do is make a contribution into the SMSF. If let's just say you're making 120, 150 rental income, you've got 8 properties, most of them paid off. You've got a good sort of cash flow, and you're not spending that money. You've got 15K spare. Could you then sort of send that to and it's like an employer paying your contribution? Would that
you can. Yeah, you definitely could. So you could do that like both ways, before or after tax contributions, and then make that work. Absolutely.
Yeah, because these are two separate entities, right? Like if you've fired, right, which is financial independence, and then you pay that money into your superannuation, they're not looking at you. They don't care who you are. They're not assessing you. They're assessing how much income's coming through and what's going to continue to come through the super. So that does then open up those. That's interesting. Super interesting.
I did want to ask. I think that was. I thought that would be an interesting question, and hopefully people kind of look at that and say, well, okay, great. I've been able to achieve some good success outside of super. Now there's potentially options in a tax.
Good question.
Yeah, it's a good one as well. I thought about this, and I think I know the answer, but I want to hear what are your thoughts on
So can I ask, if a combined super is set up and there is a significant age gap between the parties, say 10 years, how does this look at retirement age regarding distribution and tax outcomes?
Yep. So great question again. So say my husband retires before I do, and I'm still working, I'm still in accumulation phase.
It's not fair.
My husband would move to pension phase. His earnings and his proceeds would have a different tax bracket to me. And then if we had a property in the Superfund and we sold it, the proceeds that are attributable to him would receive his tax calculations, and then I would pay tax at my accumulation tax rates. So basically it's split. There's a little bit complicated, the additions, subtractions in the background, but the accountants have a way of working that out.
So how is the allocation done? Is it done through super contributions of how much input that each of you are putting in? So I'm putting in $100 a week and my wife's putting in $50 a week. Does that then over the next 50 years mean that my allocation is I own 75 and she only owns 25%? Like, is that how is it?
I really want this answered for me. My understanding is it's part of that, but then it's also part of your balance that you carry through, and then they calculate a percentage of that. So can we throw that to an accountant to answer that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I think I'm going to rewatch this, and when we get
so
Jeremy
myself.
on next, we're going to ask Jeremy these questions because I think there'd be value in these.
But also the other part of that is like, is it treated like a unit trust, right? Where the units are set, but it sounds like it's not set like that at all. So.
No, it's not set like a unit trust.
Cool. Okay. I am very cautious of time, and I know that these comments will not stop. They will just keep coming.
Two more, Joe. Can we have two more? Or do we need to finish? Up to you.
Let's go two more. Let's go two more. But I am very appreciative of this. Has been an unreal session. But okay, what is the difference between a trust and company, and what are the pros and cons? So I guess can I buy a property in just a trust, and then can I buy a property in a company and a trust, and why and what's the difference?
Probably look at it from a lending. Would you want to? I mean,
from a lending perspective, that's what I'm interested in. Yeah,
for sure. I'll talk first about the structure first, and then about lending. So, if we buy it's a company trust, so trust here, company on top. If we have a trust, you still need that trust to have a boss, right? The trustee.
Yeah.
When we don't have a company that's the trustee, it is you as an individual, or you and your wife as the individual trustees of the fund. So what happens with that in terms of a flow of money is any proceeds from the trust will just automatically flow through, or you'll distribute to the beneficiaries of the trust, but then most likely to you and your wife or your partner. When we have the trust and the company, we're able to distribute to the company and then secure that tax rate at 30%, right? Whereas say if we've made a really big gain over here with the individual trustees, it could push our tax bracket up to 45%, whatever the highest tax bracket is these days. So it really is a tax strategy structure that we're talking about, and then the flow of money and how that works for you guys. It's easier if we have a trust that has a trust that has a corporate trustee with that accountant's letter structure to be able to say, hey, it's washing its face, it's taking care of itself over here. If the trust with the individual trustee, you could still be liable for that. We might have to include that still in your servicing.
So why do people buy in just trusts then? Why do they do that?
I would suggest possibly not always the best advice possibly has been given to them, and maybe a lack of understanding of what the client was looking to achieve.
It's like forced flow, right? It has to go through it. A trust can't hold assets. They can't hold it. They have to distribute. It's like a bucket with a hole in it, right?
It's such a great way to describe it. It's a bucket with a hole in it, and every year you have to distribute. It must go out. Whereas when we've got the trust with the company, you just go straight up to that company. It can just sit there and you can retain those earnings. And then when you retain those earnings to a certain point, you could pay yourself a dividend. You could pay someone else a dividend, and distribute them. You got so much more control.
I tell you what's even like the beauty. So I've been running company for a little while now, and the beauty of it, the true beauty of it is, I can make, let's just say I make $100,000, right? That gets distributed to me. I pay it through my normal tax rate, and I pay 45% tax rate because I'm on that marginal tax rate. So my $100,000, if I retain that earnings in a company, retain that $100,000, I can then use and leverage this $100,000 to go buy an asset off of the back of that. So where I'm having 45% tax, I'm now having $100,000 rather than my $55,000. So you can then use that money to go out there and multiply it and multiply it. Still, you have to pay your company tax.
It's just 30%. Yep.
On the proceeds, but you get so much more leverage and opportunity in that. So
well, you think about that, Joe, like instead of distributing it to yourself at 45%, you distribute it to the company, you pay 30% tax, you're saving yourself 15% tax. And that is, like you said, investing straight back somewhere else for an income producing asset. And then the circle and this perpetual circle just continues, and we just keep going exponentially up.
It's the property flywheel. I would even sort of say as much.
Ooh,
Or this probably
I like that.
what I was going to say though, I think is the company tax rate now gone down to, didn't they go down to 25% or
25? That's very true. Yeah. Is it?
So yeah, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, 25% for trading businesses, and for companies that hold assets, it's 30%.
You're right. You're right. 100%. Yeah, you're right. Let's finish on this one, because I want to know the thing I loved about. The thing I've loved a lot about this. Yeah, we'll get to this, but I've loved so much about this is that you've not just told us that everything's going to go up in property and SMSF is the best thing to slice bread. You've actually given us the warts and all, which I think is fantastic. Like, you're not just saying you've told us the negatives as well. So that's why I thought this would be a great fitting way to finish. What's your best and worst story with SMSF that you've seen? Hopefully not too bad, but yeah.
Oh gosh, that's such a good question.
Put you on the spot. Sorry.
I think I'll start maybe with the worst. So worst story is a discussion I had with a client that set up an SMSF, made the rollover transfer into their bank account, dabbled in some shares, really didn't do much, so was not actively involved in it, and went, it's not for me, shut it down, went back to a retail fund.
Oh, wow.
That for me is so sad, because there was so much opportunity lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Best story, I'd say I'm working at the moment with some clients who are giving me some of the best stories, people who are talking, solid balances, and I'm going, we can do 2, we can do 3 properties right now. That is how solid, their position is. And going from them saying to me, Bernie, I've maxed out my borrowing, I can't do anything, I'm so itchy and ready to go, and me having a look and going, we are on fire, we are ready to go and do something right now. And it's not just 1, it's 2, 3. So that growth and that opportunity to get in right now, when we're in such a crucial time in the market, really excites me, because it's true wealth that is going to be created for these clients.
Yeah. No one else is going to do this for you. The super balance is not going to shoot up. You've got leverage that you can use in property that you don't have access to in your super fund. Like, but you need to be someone that's kind of a little bit active in it. But it's like, I hope this session has made it a little clearer of like, what the hell is this stuff and how do we do it? So what is the first step? Okay, so I'm sold. I've got a super balance. Me and my wife, we got $60,000 each. We got $120,000. What do we do, Bernadette? How do we get an amazing broker like yourself? How do we get more Bernadette in our lives?
Totally. Or it would be, I'd be happy to chat to you. It'd be reach out to me, or reach out to your broker if you know that they're solid on SMSF, and chat to them and go, hey, I want to make this happen, and crunch the numbers. If it's a tick, if it's a yes, reach out to your accountant, set up that trust, get the rollover happening, and don't look back.
Love it. So how do we, from broking standpoint as well, you and Aaron absolutely crush it. So can you give us a run through Attilia? Did I say it right?
Yeah,
you said it right.
Yeah,
I did.
Attilia Wealth Mortgage Brokers. So we've been operating for 8 years, and We have a true belief that property is the path to creating intergenerational wealth for us and our families. And we live, eat, breathe property. We have 4 mortgage brokers in our business, supported by a really solid team. So when you're coming to us, you're not just getting us, you're getting an entire team. And things that I'm really proud on is the lifelong relationships we're building with clients. We do 12-month loan reviews for our clients. So every 12 months, we look at your portfolio. We ask for a better rate with the bank that you're with. We're not looking for a refinance. We're just trying to get you the best, sharpest rate. We're going to send you some property reports. And at that point, if you're like, Bernie, we're ready to go again, we lock in another session and we go again for another approval. So that's our whole ethos. That's our mission. That's what we've been put on here to do, is to help people master that finance game so they can achieve passive income through property.
What I've brought up here when it loads is the podcast as well, which I probably shouldn't cross promote, but it's all right. It's okay. I listen to it myself. I listen to a lot of podcasts, as people know. Well, I mean, yeah, but no, I'm an abundance kind of thing, like Australian property investment podcast. Like Aaron has got you get some great guests, including yourself on there. I love the stories you guys have that you share, that you're able to. You have to get on there as well, Joe. I mean, Aaron's asked me to go on. I said, "Yep, I'll come on soon. Give me 6 or 12 months." But yeah, I reckon you have to get some Joe on there too. But no, he's a great interviewer. But yeah, just wanted to share that for people who want to check out more at Telia Wealth in their lives.
Thank you so much, guys.
Love it. No, this has been an unreal session. Thank you very much, Bernadette. If anyone's got any SMSF questions, throw them Bernie's way. Check out Atelia. But yeah, let's go buy ourselves a lovely little property. Let's get some self-managed super fund going, and let's make it happen, guys. Good luck. Catch you later. Thanks, Bernie. See you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Bye.